So we are talking about absolute morality. Is there such a thing as an absolute morality? Now, one of the things I've told you in the other videos is that I'm going to go over this time and time again. And I'm going to give you different lenses to look at the nature of morality so that you see quite clearly and quite obviously that the answer is yes. And why am I going to do that? Because I believe that if you come to the conclusion that there is in fact such a thing as an absolute morality, well then you are 87% of the way towards believing, towards knowing that there is a God. And I said knowing that there is a God. Well, why is that? Because, like I've said in other videos, it could not have spontaneously arisen from other sources. Now, I say 87% because there are other theories as to how a moral code, if it in fact exists, could have spontaneously arisen or could have evolved. They have to do with biological evolution, that animals cooperate, that we learned cooperation and it helped us survive in packs, and we learned traits like altruism, and over millions of years those evolved into something that looks suspiciously like morals, but they are not necessarily in fact morals. So I will deal with that later on. At first glance, I would say the potential flaw in that is that things like cooperation and altruism could very easily be maladaptive if you're talking about in terms of pure survival. That could very easily be a trait that could be considered maladaptive. But I'll look at the theories and I'll deal with that later. Let's just look right now. Is there such a thing as a moral code? Is there such a thing as an absolute right and an absolute wrong? And I would say that the answer to that is quite clearly yes. So let's look. Now, one of the things that happens when atheists are talking about this is they have a couple of talking points, and these talking points are really, really, really subtle spin jobs that if you do not tease them out first, you go down a rabbit hole that completely misleads you from the point. I'm not necessarily saying that they do this on purpose, but most intelligent atheists are aware of the fact that if they agree that there is such a thing as an objective morality, you're already too close to a God. So you have to kind of try to make sure that there isn't one when you enter the argument. So, thing number one that they do, that is a subtle, very subtle spin. The Bible itself is not moral. It is not a morally good book. It is not a morally perfect book. So, we have to remove the Bible from the discussion because that isn't the point. Matt Dillahunty, for example, always refers back to, the Old Testament, Exodus 21, I believe, is a chapter where the Bible itself condones slavery. And he uses this to point out that the Bible itself is not a moral book or not a morally perfect book. So okay, fine. Then for argument's sake, the Bible is not the standard of that morality. The Bible is not a representation of perfect morality. That doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a standard of right and wrong. If we remove the Bible from the conversation altogether, now let's just look without a Bible in our hand. Is there such a thing as an absolute right and an absolute wrong? We don't have a Bible in our hand. What do? Is there such a thing as an absolute right and an absolute wrong? And I believe that the answer is yes. You don't need to have a Bible in your hand to understand the answer as quite obviously yes. You also don't need to know what that absolute right and wrong is in any given situation. It's not always accessible to a human being. I can think of a bunch of moral conundrums. For example, a guy shoots his wife. It's wrong, kill your wife. But his wife is cheating on him with his best friend. All of a sudden we start getting to areas where, who can honestly say what is right or wrong? That doesn't mean that there isn't a standard of right and wrong, that there isn't an absolute right in that situation. It just means that which human being can figure that out? Now, like all atheist arguments, the slavery argument that Matt Dillahunty is using to win the argument for the atheist side, the paradox here is that it actually underscores, like most atheist arguments, it underscores my side of the argument. that there is in fact a God. Paradoxically, it illustrates and underscores the point that I'm trying to make. How does it do that? Well, when he talks about it, he says, and I've seen this word for word, promise you, in a conversation about morals, he brings up the Old Testament and says, Exodus 21, God condones slavery. And then he goes on to say, word for word, and we all know that slavery is wrong. Now, right there is the crux of the issue, because this is exactly what the atheist tries to do every single time, and the distortion is very subtle. They want to have their moral cake and eat it too. They want to appeal when they start telling you that the Bible is not a perfectly moral book. In order to make the case that it isn't, he has to appeal to what? We all know that slavery is wrong. We do. Huh. Well, that's a really interesting statement. How do we all know that slavery is wrong? I thought you thought that a human being was just a highly evolved animal. Let's just go with that for a minute. If a human being is a highly evolved animal, why is it necessarily we all know that it's wrong to enslave another human being? I own a cat. A cat is an animal. Is it wrong for me to own a cat? Nobody ever argues that. No, a cat is a pet. Well, if a human being is just a highly evolved animal, why is it necessarily wrong with the capital W for me to own them? That's question number one. But the more important question is, how can you in one voice say, we all know that slavery is wrong, capital W wrong, and at the same time tell me that morality is in some way subjective? That's the real crux of the issue. The other one is a side note. Again, the real crux of the issue is right there. Clear as crystal. Matt Dillahunty himself, when he is talking about morality, appeals to this mysterious third party, to the subject that we call truth. Do you understand what I'm saying? He said this. These were his own words. We all know that slavery is wrong. That means capital W wrong. Means wrong always. Means wrong not according to a culture or according to a person, just plain wrong. That sounds suspiciously like there is such a thing as an absolute right and an absolute wrong. Does the Bible get it right? I don't know. Bible condones slavery. That's true. Atheists are right about that. So maybe the Bible gets it wrong. I've heard no good apologetics on the subjects thus far that explains that. So let's just say the Bible gets it wrong for argument's sake. But even when we are talking about the Bible getting morality wrong, we are making an appeal to some mysterious third party that we call truth. Every single solitary time you make a moral decision, you make some mysterious appeal to this mysterious third party to the subject. And that third party is obvious right, obvious wrong. There is such a thing called morally correct forever and always, and such a thing called morally incorrect forever and always. This is actually a no-brainer. This is actually a no-brainer. The only real mystery is whether this could have possibly evolved into being, or does it require a God to be there? Because even when atheists talk about the subject of morality, they make appeals to this mysterious third party called the truth. And if there is no such thing as a moral truth, you can't make appeal to it. You cannot say slavery is morally wrong. According to who? Not according to Southern slaveholders. Not according to, people who want to enslave people. So that standard right there, you are saying there, you are making an appeal to a third party, and that third party is called truth. Now, if that third party doesn't exist, you do the work by yourself. You do the philosophical conclusion. But there is almost no way on earth that there could be any such coherent concept of justice whatsoever. Because then all justice is subjective. If that third party called truth does not exist, if that third party called right and wrong does not exist, then the entire concept of justice starts to look creaky, like it can't exist. So how do we have laws at all? Think about it this way. I knock you down, I take your money. I punch you in the face. I overpower you and I take your money. Okay? Why is that wrong? Why is that wrong? You're weak, I'm stronger than you. I knocked you down, I punched you in the face, I took all your money. Sucks for you, sure. But is it so wrong? Is that really wrong? I'm smarter than you. I'm stronger than you. Probably better looking than you too. I knocked you down, took your money. Yeah, it sucks for you, sure. It's really good for me. So why is it wrong? Why is it wrong? When you go to the root of a moral question, forever and always, the appeal is to truth. When you try to rationalize morality, when you try and come up for an explanation as to why something is wrong, you forever and always make an appeal towards a third party called the truth. If there is no such thing as an objective truth, you can no longer make that appeal. That it is not wrong for me to knock you down and take your money. You can maybe make technically laws in a society so that there is order and sanity, because if everyone was beating each other up and taking their money, society would fall apart. But there would be no inherent concept of justice whatsoever to ever appeal to. None. None. I would be like the lion killing the zebra. You're a wuss. I took your money. I knocked you down. Sucks for you, but it's not necessarily wrong. Yeah, it sucks for you. Deal with it. It ain't wrong. I'm better for it. It's good for me. Same thing with slavery. Ultimately, the argument about slavery hinges on the fact. Ultimately, the argument about slavery that the atheists make, the irony of it, the paradox is that it hinges on the fact that there is such a thing as a concept called the truth. The truth about morality that we all sort of know. We all have, we all get glimpses of it and we're all privy to it and we can all search it out. But we're not creating it. Just look at the way we talk about truth. If I were to give you a moral conundrum right now and say, find the truth in this situation, find the moral truth in this, what would you do? You may go, you may revert to books of the past. You probably read Aristotle's Ethics. You'd probably read the Bible. Wow, lo and behold, you'd read the Bible. You'd look at some ancient scriptures, you'd look at some ancient texts, you'd look at some modern theories of justice, and you'd look inside your own heart, and you'd wrestle with it. But the entire process would be one of investigation. That's very important. It would not be one of creation. If I said, what is the moral truth in this situation, and gave you a moral, conundrum, you would investigate sources outside of yourself. You would not be doing a creative process. That's very, very important. Because that implies that there is a truth to be found, just like there is in science. Just like a scientist would take out a microscope. If I told you what is the moral truth in this situation, you would investigate sources outside of yourself. And you would look inside your own heart, sure. But you would also go, and those sources would be written 2,000 years ago. Some of them. Aristotle's Ethics, I don't even know when it was written. A while back. Thus showing you that it is not in time. That these concepts are eternal in nature. And they're unchanging. Because someone could have had access to them 2,000 years ago. And someone can have access to them 100 years from now. They don't change. So yeah, you can say they look suspiciously like evolutionary biology, but to me, they look suspiciously like God. Because they don't change. And they're the same, yesterday, today, and forever. Gee, that sounds like a character I know. They're the same, yesterday, today, and forever. And they don't change. And you can look up a book, you can look up Aristotle's Ethics from however